Hello and welcome to an evening with the Reverend Dr. Steve Connor. My name is Brian Mason, and on behalf of the All Saints North Worcestershire Life Group, we're pleased that you're able to join us on this occasion. Steve, let's make a start. You and I know each other well enough. I think perhaps we've been involved in ministry on three continents, but I know you've covered 100 countries, so I've certainly not been with you on those occasions. But why don't you start us off this evening with just telling us a little bit about not only your coming to faith, but how a certain gentleman called Coach Rex had influence there in that change of lifestyle.
Brian, it is absolutely great to be here. And yes, we've been working together for 30 years. And I believe this is the only time you've referred to me as Reverend Doctor. And I think Steve sounds a lot better. I think my skin crawled when you said that. I'm a product of sports ministry. I never would have darkened the doors of a church, never would have been interested in anything spiritual at all if it hadn't been for my coach. And there's an organization in the United States called Fellowship of Christian Athletes, FCA. And my coach was everything. My God was sport. You know, you climb the top of your priority list and you'll find your God. He's at the top. Maybe it's money, maybe it's sex, maybe whatever it's going to be. At the top of that priority list, you'll find your God. For me, it was sport. Came from a divorced home, lived and died for sport. And because of that, sport became my identity, like so many of us have. And so to enter into that world, I had to go through the gateway of this coach who was a dominant figure in the Chicago, Illinois area. And he said, Connor, why don't you go to FCA camp? And I'm like, what's FCA? You know, Future Coaches of America. He said, yeah, be good for you. And I went. And when I realized it was Christian, I made up my mind that I was not going to listen to those preachers. I wasn't going to listen to them. But what really struck me is that sports people were the ones that were talking about Christ. And as a non-Christian, I think this is really important for us Christians now. This was 1970. It's been a while. But I thought as a 15-year-old, at best, these guys would talk about Jesus Christ like I can talk about Abraham Lincoln. I can give you quotes, I can give you history, I can give you details, but I don't know him. And what shocked me was that these athletes and the campers at this camp were talking about Jesus as if they knew him. And that simultaneously attracted me and repelled me. And my coach, amazing, my coach, he sat down, he brought 40 kids and he did it for 30 years. He brought 40 kids to camp. And I figured he was just taking them to keep them out of trouble. But he brought them to camp and he shared one-on-one his faith and presented the gospel to every kid. And he said, Connor, you want to become a Christian? Are you a Christian? And I went, I did the best I could. I lied. I said, sure, I'm a Christian. Just anything to get him and the Holy Spirit off my back. And of course, it was a few weeks later that I really just surrendered and said, okay, God, if you're God, I want to follow you. So yeah, Coach Rex.
Coach Rex. Well, I'm going to refer to your lady's book in a little while. But one of the things that you said there, and it probably is apropos to what you've just said there, you said when you wrestle with God, you have to lose first before you can win. Just tease out that statement for me a bit.
Well, you have to. Well, first you have to wrestle with God. I mean, there has to be this point where you come to Him, and you're never going to win. You're never going to win. You can't beat Him. But why would you want to? And something in that losing, something in that surrender, giving yourself. Finally, no, you want to hang on so tightly. My father had a world record in skydiving, and it was a wild, crazy lifestyle. And I was in that lifestyle as a young kid. And, I just thought to myself, my life is my own, and I want to do whatever I want to do. Like Jack from, what's the name of what's the name? It's in my book. Jack from the movie Titanic. But from Titanic, he leans over and says, "I'm the king of the world, and I wanted to be the king of the world." And I think we all have that, and finally have to surrendering. So wrestling God, coming in a confrontation with God, and then realizing that you just have to lose and surrender and give it to Him. And boy, it's so contrary to the sports world, where when you lose and you give everything, you actually win. And so, yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of people, whether they're at high level sport or at any level, to become a Christian, they think it's a whole new section and a whole different chapter. Don't see how they can mix the two. I mean, what about you to go as a pro footballer? Just tell us a little bit about that. But then to kind of merge and morph into sports ministry, was that a difficult transition, or was it seamless?
Well, it certainly wasn't seamless. I think he's, as much as we say that we're strong Christians, are still, we have to identify them. But if I could go back, after I became a Christian, I really was enthralled, and I went to a camp as a young leader, and I realized that sports camps are a factory for leadership development. And as a young leader, it was the first time I had 7 people under, where I was a camper prior to that, but at university I'd gone, and I loved it. I loved the idea of being able to encourage these 7, 8 kids, to encourage them. So I my full ride scholarship at uni and went to a small university that studied theology. So I had this theology, and then I ended up with the historic Chicago Bears, and then traded to the LA Rams and had 3 knee surgeries. But I had this professional and theology, so that kind of brought me into the world of sport. But it was hard. It was hard to make that transition, as I know you've worked with a number of high profile athletes, and you know that their whole identity is in this. And what kind of job you get afterwards? One, you get paid a lot of money, but 2, when you walk out of your job, there's 100 people there that want your autograph. So it's a tough transition, but helping people to make that transition is important.
Hmm. And I expect that, I don't know, maybe early 20s, or you'll tell me it might be a little bit more, you made your first transition into the UK. How did that come about? What brought you to the right side of the big pond?
Well, I spent, Michelle and I have spent half of our adult life in the UK, and it was amazing. It's really fulfilled who we are, enriched our lives in an incredible way. But at the same time, it's lonely when I'm back here, and I don't think Americans quite understand. We have 50 states, so there's a lot of traveling just to do here. The breadth and the depth of the UK was amazing for us. How did it start? Boy, these are old stories you're dredging up here, Brian. I got cut by the LA Rams, and I coached for a year at university. And Michelle and I got married, and it's a fun story. I was with the historic Chicago Bears, and we have 6 guys in the Hall of Fame on that team. They were unbelievable. But I got traded to the Rams, and because I had surgeries, and then I was cut. And so the American Super Bowl is this weekend, and it's remarkable. It's the biggest holiday of the year now, as far as a presentation of looking. But you have more people watching than anything on Christmas or anything else. It's just a big American, and it's global, of course. And but I'm sitting in Los Angeles watching all my friends win the Super Bowl, and they get this Super Bowl ring that's just this huge, big ring. I don't know if I've got a bowl ring somewhere here. Yeah, like this was I was chaplain for years, so I've got one of my bowls here, but this would have been a Super Bowl ring. So all my friends winning the Super Bowl, and the rest of their lives are going to be, Steve, it's great to see you. They're showing off the ring to me. But I was sitting next to this blonde, and I never would have been sitting with her if I was still in Chicago. And I ended up marrying her. So would I trade this ring for a Super Bowl ring? Some days, but not many. Not many. So I have those days, you know. But anyhow,
Wow.
I I I had the two together were combined, and so I started working for sports ministry. And I thought this was something that was everywhere in the world, and I realized it was very unique to the United States and the United States culture. And after 3 years, a chap called Andrew Wingfield Digby needed a guy to help out, and there was a team at Oxford, the Oxford Saints American football team, and so Michelle and I went over, and we went 9 years in England and 6 years in Scotland, and it was remarkable. Changed our lives. Incredible.
Now the thing is about the UK and Steve Connor and Legacy is sports camps, and you've already shared a little bit about FCA and you becoming a Christian in that arena. So was that the inspiration to start sports camps in this country? How did that get underway?
Well, as you'll remember, because you were extremely part of it, great encouragement from his camps. But we decided to do 5 areas. I mean, originally in Christians in Sport, you picked up the phone, and if it was a high profile, you took it. If it was a church, you took it. Whatever it was, you just kind of, we were rolling at the time, trying to figure out what to do. And then we ended up breaking it into sections. We knew that high profile was one, and a very small group was there. Second one was universities and amateurs, and but the biggest, absolutely biggest, and the combination was church sport. And your sport's going to be there for a very short time of your life, but the church will always be there. And of course, you pioneered that. And then the other one was youth sport, and which is just the plethora of all these people doing sports ministry when they're young, and very few people can do it when they're older. Saying that, more people in Europe participate in sport far longer than Americans. People say Americans are great sportsmen. We're really good at watching sport, but we don't participate. Only just the 1% participate. Anyhow, going back to that, so when I was asked to develop youth ministry, I thought that the greatest way to develop long term is to develop leaders. How do you develop leaders? Sports camps. Identifying these young leaders, training them every day, watching them work, and some eliminating, but most of them bringing them in, encouraging them, and saying, God gave you this incredible gift. We're great. If a musician walks into a church, the pastor knows what to do, and they can ultimately bring them in, disciple them, and bring them along and utilize them. But if a sportsman comes into church, they're going, what do I do? I just hope they don't steal anything. You know? So we're learning and training the church how to utilize this world of sport. And the really amazing thing is that we're all involved in this sport. I mean, you do not have to train a baby to play. Everyone plays.
Mm. Now, you started the very first sports camp, to my knowledge, because I've done a little bit of checkup here, was 1994. And I think we might have started with just 30 young people. Tell us what happened after that.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what happened before that. Is that I was terrified. Here I'm an American. I'm in this historic country, and I this pioneer. And I remember Wingfield Digby's wife said there's the two hardest things in the world in the UK to do, and the second one is to start something. I said, okay, I'll bite. What's the hardest thing? And she said to kill something that needs to be killed. And so it was going to be hard to start this new venture, and so it took some pioneering. And someone said there was this deputy head at Dartmouth, and he might be sympathetic. And then when I heard that he was really involved in Navigators, which is an amazing organization, they understand discipleship so well. When I heard he was involved in that, I said, perfect. I remember going up and seeing you, Brian, and that school was amazing. Probably the best state school I've ever seen. But going up there and seeing what you'd done, and then you said, yes, I'll get involved. And then I remember I broke down, my car broke down, had to be towed all the way back to Oxfordshire. And but it was well worth the trip to go up there. And then we pretty much partnered on camps together after that. And so, yeah, it was good times.
And of course, I mean, here we are 25 years, a quarter of a century after that very first camp with just 30 youngsters. I know that you've been in the States for kind of, well, the second part of that, really. But where do you see those camps at now, and how valuable are they to families and young people?
I can't remember the guy's name. He was the 1 minute father guy. The UK's version of
Rob Parsons.
Yeah. Remember Rob? He just didn't know what to do with his son. His son was having a really tough time at that time. Everything's wonderful now, amazing. And Rob was such an encouragement to us, and he encouraged but his son became a Christian, got fired up, and realized. And I went, oh my word! So Parsons was very, very. He was an amazing man, an amazing father, and for him to struggle, I thought, well, most of us probably have children that don't quite fit anywhere, and that they want to be involved in something, and maybe if it's cells are going to be, it's going to be gaming, otherwise it's going to be music, but into this huge world where the church really hadn't been working is sport. And so this involved a whole section. Rob's son was into sport, and we realized that for families, that could be a giant part of who they were. And we not only would we encourage the sport, we encourage their faith and their faith in that sport.
Well, and really what you have left behind you now is kind of remarkable sports camps in England, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales, and often back to back. And often there'd be 200, 250 youngsters in a week, and sometimes 100 leaders. So that all started with you, dear brother, coming over. So that's one thing that we're grateful for in this country. Another thing I remember that you got underway with was something called Night of Champions. Why don't you just tell us briefly about Night of Champions?
When I was at university, I realized when I transferred to the Christian university, I realized that we had some really amazing sports people on our team that weren't being utilized. And I thought, these are world-class sports people. How do we utilize them? So I did this thing called Night of Champions. I think we had 100 people, and we invited the youth groups around the area to come out, and then we gave testimonies and tracks, and then we did sport. We had fun. We actually did sport. It really was like a half-day slice of sports camp. And in that time, some of these athletes, we trained them how to share their faith. I was just a student at the time, did the best I could. And at that university, it was called Azusa Pacific in Southern California. And so I don't know how many years I've been out, 36 maybe. And the Night of Champions has gone for 36 years. It's the biggest youth event, one night youth event, evangelistic youth event in Los Angeles. So it's been a big deal. And a lot of other colleges have taken it on since then. And a lot of other countries have too. And the UK has definitely used it. It's a great way to recruit and get people a taste of what sports ministry is about. And it's pretty much, you do a lot of games. There's an outdoor assembly. Then there's a small group time or a small snack time. Then there's an indoor assembly where you use quizzes and that and testimony. Calling too. So yeah, it's been a great thing. I remember one time, I forgot where we were. In fact, I won't mention where we were, but Brian, you were helping out with one of those Night of Champions, and logistics is everything. We had 400 kids, and I guess the church that we were at didn't think that we were going to get that many kids. So I remember for the snack, which was like 20 minutes long, all of a sudden we looked over and there's a line of 100 people, and these two old ladies serving tea for every kid. We thought, that's going to take a minute a piece. That's 100 minutes for just the first 100 kids. There's 400 there. So we had to rush out and grab some snacks and that. So yeah, logistics was everything. We learned a lot of lessons.
Well, I'll take your word for that one. Now let's move to your kind of authorship, and I know that you've written 10 books, and latest one that's really just hit the streets is Rugged Discipleship. And I think for the benefit of folks that are both listening now and will listen in the recording, then it's a remarkable page turner. And not only do you share about your sense of adventure, but just the places you crash into and crash through, not least on a motorbike. Just tell us about your kind of 4,000-mile journey that started in Scotland and went to Turkey, and some of the interesting things that happened along the way, not least your contact with the mafia and so on, which is all in the book, of course, for those who choose to read it.
Oh, well, I don't know how great this one is. It doesn't draw with the greatest light on me. But when we moved up to Scotland, it was great. We always took a couple weeks and traveled somewhere in Europe and taught. And you did it a number of times too. And we'd just teach there, spend a week. And I was going to do something in Bulgaria and then go over to Turkey. And when I was in Bulgaria, I drove and I bought a brand new BMW motorcycle. Oh, I loved that. I loved it. But I had 3 years of payments, and I bought the insurance, got to the border of Romania, couldn't get in. And so I ended up sleeping in a watermelon patch and sleeping overnight there, then woke up the next morning and took off to go into Bulgaria. And while I'm across there, I thought it must be the friendliest place in the world. People are waving and waving and waving. So I pulled up to this one city, and these ladies are waving. I realized they're prostitutes. I went, yo! Got away from that. And so I finally make it to Sofia, and a colleague was there, and he'd only been there for 8 weeks himself. And while he was in Sofia, he was going to be started teaching at the seminary. And an American guy, we had both taught at Wheaton College. And so I'd visit him. And so when I got there, of course, it's Cyrillic, and it's so hard to find the language and try to find out where he lived. So he said, pick somewhere in the city center. And while you're at the city center, while you're there, I will make sure and find you. And so I was just pulling up I saw McDonald's, ubiquitous McDonald's at every city center in Europe, unfortunately. And one of the great American exports. And while I pulled up there, just before I was to pull in, I think it was a Ferrari. But this guy, boom, cuts in front of me, big red, fancy red sports car. And he says to me, he could tell I was English. He said, "You got to be fast in Sofia, man." And he gets out, and he had this incredible suit. Incredible. I don't know if it was Gucci or not, but we'll call him the Gucci man. And he had this beautiful Gucci suit. And I ended up talking to him and trying to share my faith with him. Waited around for about an hour, and finally got picked up by my buddy, Bob. So Bob takes me back. We weave our way back to the city, and we go to his house. And he was a flat, and he's pretty well off. He lived in a nice flat that was gated, and the member of parliament lived right next to him. And we went, talked. We put the motorcycle in the garage, closed the steel gate, locked it up. I locked up my motorcycle, put the van in front of it, and my buddy's wife, Becky, woke up the next morning. And so, where's Steve? I think he's gone out for a ride. And you go, no, he's probably in bed. Runs over to the garage in the gated community, and it had been stolen. They had torched through 3 different doors to find it. And then they ended up finding it, put some liquid nitrogen on the lock, shattered it, pushed the van out of the way, zipped up the door, and zoom, they were out of there, gone in 60 seconds. And so I felt terrible. And then I felt really bad when I realized that my insurance didn't cover Bulgaria. And I was going to have 3 years of payments, real smart guy, on nothing because I couldn't pay for it. We went to the police, and the police said, if you've got contacts with the mafia, you'll probably be better off. Use them. And it so happened that one of the converts that was a friend of a friend at the local church that Bob was at, he knew of somebody that knew of somebody. And long story short, through a protracted 3-day thing, and then at the end, giving them the money and driving here, then driving here and driving here at 3 a.m, back at that McDonald's, we recovered the motorcycle. Probably better in the book. But the analogy is, it talks about grace. I couldn't afford the ransom, and Bob paid the ransom. And the whole analogy, though, is that if you've never experienced grace, it's hard to understand it. And though we can describe it to people, if they've never experienced grace in their life. So as a disciple maker, are we giving people grace? Something that we talk about a lot, but something that many people have never experienced. Grace in a small way, they can identify this huge grace, God's incredible grace in a big way.
I mean, your central theme in the book, Steve, certainly brings out the title of Rugged Discipleship. As you've traveled through all these countries, then it's been with that purpose to get men and women alongside you and to bring them up into journey with Jesus. Would that
Indeed. Indeed. In fact, I don't even know if it's alongside me, but alongside the local church. If there's no church, something, but to identify and to bring, because I want it to be indigenous, unique to its own culture. And so bringing it into the whatever Christian thread that we can find globally. But the main verse that's really worked for us in this thing is 1 Thessalonians 2:8. 1 Thessalonians 2:8. I'm sorry, 1 Thessalonians 2:8. Because we loved you so much, Apostle Paul, because we loved you so much, we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well. Let me read it again. 1 Thessalonians 2:8. Because we love you so much, we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well. And it's interesting. I find that we're either or. The church is either we're going to share the gospel, or we're going to be woolly and only just share our friendship. But the combination of the two, the gospel and our lives, and living out our lives, actually presenting our lives and living them out, not on a Zoom call. I know it's the best we can do right now, but living out our lives in front of other people is powerful. Yeah. And obviously that was the principle that Jesus used when he made disciples. And when he tells us to make disciples, I don't think you can do it in the classroom. I think it has to be done living out. When I see Mr. Mason loving his wife and having, gosh, you've been married now, what, 20 years? Yeah. How many years you been married?
Well, a little over 50. That's as far as you're going to get.
Yeah. Well, when I see that, it's like, it encourages me. And I want to be a better husband. And because I see that, and I see you guys together, and it makes me want to be a better grandfather now too, because I just see your life. And I think that that's really important. So again, because we loved you so much, we were delighted to share, not hold back, but to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well. And the gospel, isn't that just it's got to be the most understated word in the history of language. I mean, the gospel, good news. I mean, it's unbelievable news. It's fantastic news. It's outrageously great news. Why? Is because there's bad news. And the bad news is that there's hell, and hell's a reality, and real people go to heaven and real people go to hell. And the separation from God is horrible, horrible. But again, there's this unbelievably great news, and it happened through an incredible sacrifice. And the Apostle Paul wanted to share that to the Thessalonians. And not only to share that, but to share his life. Why? Because this incredible power of love that filled him up. And I think that comes through clear. And so I think in the Rugged Discipleship, we're trying to put that together not only this incredible gospel, not just articulate it verbally, have a mental understanding, but to have a physical, to have not just proposition, but to have a relation conception of it too.
I think I just about drained my highlight pen as I got to the almost last page of the book, Steve. And then suddenly this came up. You were speaking to a high school, and one of the things you wanted to reiterate to those youngsters there, I think you used the phrase, "Show me your friends, and I'll show me your future." What did you mean by that?
Show me your friends, and I will show you your future. And I found this, it's in some ways, I'm 59, and I came over to the UK in my 20s, and young, energetic, think know it all, and you've had so much more experience over the time. I don't have that energy, and my beard is white, but at the same time, all that time, you can see people that have gathered around people that will mentor them, and have gathered around good friends, and it's made them strong. And you've seen other people that have isolated themselves, that have not gone out and have not found relationships. And maybe you have to be the one to develop it, but they're there, and so you have to be one. So in all those years, we've seen people grow strong. In the introduction, going back from there, going full circle, the introduction. I remember having a friend that said, "Where are they now? Where are those Christians now? And what has happened to those guys?" And he went on to say, "We need rugged Christians." And I asked him, "How do you get rugged Christians?" He said, he blurted out, and I'll never forget it. He said, "Rugged discipleship." And I think that's what we need. It's a great answer. And if you look through the Gospels, it was rugged.
Mm. Well, here's my last question, Steve, and then we'll close the recording, but it'll give opportunity for people looking on tonight to ask you a few questions. But the USA, like the UK, has been pretty battered by COVID. What's maybe the one or two things that God has been saying to you during this wilderness time?
Well, be creative. God's allowed it, so therefore it's a great opportunity. Look at what you guys are doing. It's remarkable. I mean, where you could be just sitting at home watching the telly, instead you're here doing something, encourage each other. It's not physical, but it's as close as you can get. It's remarkable, the technology we have, and it's not going to go away either. A lot of people are teaching online now, and the super teachers, I bet 20 years from now, this is not a good idea for it's not a good concept for teachers, but I think the super teachers are going to be teaching 1,000 people, and there's going to be monitors in classrooms. And so it's not going away. I don't like it, but how can I utilize it? Because we're going to grab and jump on everything we can. A lot of people will just turn their backs and say, "Hey, we can't do anything." And so, so I say there's opportunities, great opportunities in this adversary time.
Mm. Well, the Reverend Dr. Steve Conner, thank you so much for your time and for being a bit of a super teacher for us this evening. We're grateful.